Good Monday, friends. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages here with your tropical update. It is June 14th, 2021, and we've got 4 areas to get into detail with. First is Tropical Depression number 2, investigative areas 92L and 94L, and then we'll jump over to the Pacific that has a tropical storm, Carlos. All right, right now, here's what's the latest. 2 weeks into the season, 14 days, today's the 14th, and we've got 3 areas to watch in the Atlantic Basin, plus the action out in the Pacific. Here's the broad overall look of the Atlantic Basin right now as we look at it through infrared satellite imagery. When we're looking at the yellows and the shades of red, that's areas of high convective activity, heavy thunderstorms, and that gives us a pinpoint of where the tropical activity is. You can point out some of that right now, one off the coast of the United States, another in the Bay of Campeche, another wave entering the eastern Caribbean, and then a very robust African easterly wave that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. First, let's start off with the one a little closer to home off the east coast of the United States. The good news with this one is notice the general direction in which it's moving away from the coastline. It is no threat. It is not going to be a threat, but it has been upgraded to a tropical depression. The good news here also is if you look at the satellite imagery, you can see kind of what's going on. We have a frontal boundary off to the north and west, a cold front that is dropping southeast and helping to push that storm away from the coastline. We had a burst of convection earlier, but as we switch up the imagery and look at visible satellite, you can kind of see that we're seeing some wind shear taking place, and that is effectively blowing the convection, the thunderstorm activity, away and exposing the low-level center that you can see spinning there. But it is about to move over the warm waters of the Gulf Stream. So there is a small window that we could see some organization and development. National Hurricane Center says, you know what, we think that this will get that burst and upgrade to a tropical storm. If that does happen, it'll get a name, and that name will be Bill, the second named storm of the season. Here's a look at the sea surface temperatures with the satellite imagery overlaid. If you look at the dark reds here in the last couple of frames, that is the warm waters of the Gulf Stream, and it is currently moving right over that. So we'll see if we get a burst of organization and thunderstorm activity to get that upgrade to the next name on the list, which is Bill. Now, that's not the only game in town, because there's 2 other areas in the Atlantic Basin that could either get Bill if TD2 does not form, or Claudette, or even Danny if all 3 develop. Now, you may be asking yourself, it's a little early in the season to be getting our second named storm. Well, maybe not, because after 2020, we were well into the list by this point. But if we look at climatology, this goes from 1966 to 2009. A little bit outdated, but typically the first name system isn't until July 9th, about a month from now. And then August 1st is typically when we get the second named storm. So it's been a long time since we're a third of the way in the season that we get our second named storm, with very active seasons over the past 5 to 6 years. Now let's jump over into the Gulf of Mexico, in particular the southern Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, where we've been watching this area of convective activity, tropical disturbance for the last several days, trying to get itself organized. In the short term, probably not, but it has been coined investigative area 92L. And the thinking on this, the modeling on this, shows that in the next 5 days, chances go much, much higher, up to around 70%, or likely that it will develop enough to get either a tropical depression upgrade or even get a name as a tropical storm. Switching it up again now with the visible satellite imagery, you can see here there's a very broad circulation kind of sitting stationary over the very warm waters of the Bay of Campeche. Eventually, this will be lifting its way northwards, and as we compare the longer range models, the GFS and the European, the GFS is going to be the yellow lines, and the red is going to be the European. Now watch them. When you get the closed circle, that's the center of the storm system. As we go way out in time, by the end of this week, you see the centers, the 2 models pinpointing the centers, pretty much both in the center of the Gulf of Mexico. Very warm waters, likely the conditions will be a little more conducive for it to develop and organize. As we go into this coming weekend, further organization is possible, not set in stone, as it continues a northwards trajectory, either towards the southeast coast of Texas or into Louisiana, areas that saw impacts from Hurricane Laura last year. And then as we move farther to the north, it'll move on inland, and by Saturday night or so, we should see it onshore. What it will be by that point, still undetermined. It could fall apart totally, but this is what the modeling is looking like right now, that we could see some strengthening and maybe potentially an upgrade to a tropical storm, tropical depression, and maybe a strong tropical storm at that point. We'll see. So let's get a refresher quickly on what exactly is an invest. I just showed you that's invest right now is 92L. Invest, investigative area, and then it's followed by a number. We go from 90 to 99, and the L at the end tells us which basin it's in. The L is the Atlantic Basin, the E would be the Pacific Basin. All right, now let's get our final pick here of what's going on in the Atlantic Basin. This is now investigative area 94L. TD number 2 is 93, if you were wondering what the gap was for. This is a very robust African easterly wave, and typically, this doesn't usually happen this time of the year. The climatology is not in line for development in this part of the Atlantic. This is known as the main development region. This is usually quiet until we get towards later July, August, and September. We see it lighting on up. Very, very early, especially to see so much energy and organization associated with this as it emerges off the coast. Short term, because of the climatology, 10-20% chance of it developing, but it certainly warrants an eye to be kept on it. Now, why does it typically not happen this time of the year? Well, you've probably heard of the Saharan air layer, or a lot of dust from the Saharan desert. Very, very dry air too. So I switched things up and showed you the water vapor imagery. That shows us the moist and dry air. Dry air is what would be depicted as the kind of the rust color here, and we should be seeing a lot more of that. We're not, though, and any of it's really kind of farther to the north of where the center of 94L currently is. Also, typically the sea surface temperatures aren't that warm. I've switched things up here to show you sea surface temperatures. Anything highlighted in the yellows or oranges is anything over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is typically the threshold you need to facilitate tropical development and organization. You can see where 94L currently is located over that very warm water, and the sea surface temperature anomalies above average. Everything in the yellow is warmer than normal. So the Atlantic overall is setting the stage earlier to be a little more active. All right, let's jump over to the Pacific as we wrap things up here. We've got Carlos, no threat to land at all, but it is a tropical storm. We've got winds of 40 miles an hour, very low grade tropical storm. You need 39 miles per hour or greater. We're at 40. It's going to meander off towards the west and eventually fall apart to nothing. So nothing to worry about there. All right, that's the latest in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. If you got any questions, we're here all season long. Meteorologist Tim Pandages on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.